first speaker of the opposition.
Ladies and gentlemen, members of the opposition, judges and chair, this House believes that the world will always be a patriarchy. First of all, I would like to begin by defining the motion. Patriarchy means a social system in which men hold primary power and predominate in roles of political leadership, moral authority, social privilege, and control of property. We understand that there will always be exceptions, but patriarchy is inevitable. It has been around for over 4,000 years, so it is not just going to disappear overnight. It is tradition and it is human nature. The opposition must be living in a utopia if they think that patriarchy, which has been around for years of history and is embedded into our culture and society, will one day simply cease to exist. It is not society that has given men this dominant role, as the opposition may suggest. It is a genuine and undeniable fact that men are the dominant species, and this is reflected in the way that society works.
For information.
Yes, please.
Where is your source that men are the dominant species?
Well, it's clear in biology, as Chelsea is going to later explain, but biological reasons, sociological reasons, that the way that men have adopted this role has made them the more dominant species, as I will later discuss. Our second speaker, Brindley, will discuss the history of patriarchy, not just its inevitability, but also its necessity. In many cultures, patriarchy cannot be questioned, and this natural pattern of hierarchy is inevitable and enduring.
For information.
Yes, please.
Do you not think that nurture is also a very strong force in shaping gender identities and not just...
Of course, we accept that nurturing, but this will not make the dominant species. We are not discriminating against women in any way. However, the necessity for being a dominant species is to be strong, to be hard, and things like that. There are so many primary female historical figures that we acknowledge are evidence that women can lead, such as Margaret Thatcher, who was presented as masculine. Phrases such as the Iron Lady were adopted for her, and she had to take elocution lessons to make her voice deeper and more masculine. Only masculine women were able to adopt such leading roles. No, thank you. Our third speaker, Chelsea, will be discussing the biological reasons that there will always be a patriarchy. Men's testosterone levels are much higher than that of women, so they possess this urge to dominate, which is largely inexperienced by women. Whereas on the contrary, women have the desire and capability to care. In no way are we discriminating against the genders. However, the hierarchy is more efficient when genders play to their abilities. It is simply chance that the roles that we revere to so much in society are naturally applicable to men. Let's take a modern marriage, for example. The man proposes to his girlfriend, and then at the wedding, the father of the bride gives the bride away down the aisle. This tradition was historically adopted with arranged marriages. This is not just a result of social phenomena of patriarchy, but it is a reflection of the typical idea men play the dominant role in relationships as they do in life. In spite of the exceptions that the opposition may come up with, the majority of women want it to be this way, in spite of their desires for equality. They want men to open the door for them. The code of chivalry that we have always and will always live by. Universal institutions like that of marriage and expectations relevant are manifestations of populations' observations of statistical realities of biology, sociology and history. And that is why the world will always be a patriarchy. Thank you.
Four minutes, 31 seconds.
I'd now like to present the first speaker of the opposition.
Ladies, gentlemen, members of the proposition, judges and chair. This House truly believes that the world will not always be a patriarchy. I would like to start by rebutting the first speaker of the proposition. Gender roles are socialized, and the dominant roles that men have been forced into have been socialized, therefore can be untaught. Power dynamics have changed in the recent years. I would like to define the term patriarchy. According to the Oxford Dictionary, it is a system of society or government where men hold the power and women are largely excluded from it. That was the past, that may be the present, but that will not be the future, because over the recent years, there has been a progress in the way society treats women, and it will keep going. 200 years ago, the only role of women was to bear children and complete household tasks. Less than 100 years ago, women won the right to vote in many countries, bringing them one step closer to equality. And today, women are pursuing higher education, creating an opportunity for them to access to all kinds of jobs, from science to law to politics. They are no longer forced to stay at home, but instead, they can choose who they want to be, rather than who they are told to be. Although they still face discrimination, and we still don't live in a completely fair world, if we have achieved this huge change in 100, 200 years, we believe that women... Yes, please.
Do you have any reason to tell us why this became adopted in the first place? Do you not feel it is a human nature that meant that this is society's role, gender roles that were given out?
It was adopted in the first place because survival mainly depends on strength, but we no longer live in that world. In this new world, ability is more valued than strength. Now, to outline our second speaker, Aire, she will be talking about radical feminism, which is a philosophy regarding the social domination of women by men. She will explain how feminists use patriarchy as dividing rights, privilege, and power, just because of the gender one is born with, and as a result, oppressing women and privileging men. Yes, please.
You talk about just the gender that we're born with. Don't you think that, given biology and given the differentiations in the genders, that means something?
We have difference, but that doesn't mean one should have more rights than others. We believe there will be an equal role. Our third speaker, EiC, will talk about the fourth way of feminism, which seeks gender equality by focusing on empowerment of women. She will also talk about the progress we made over the years and highlight the future of feminism is full of hope. As I have said, women are starting to have more and more power. Women like Michelle Obama, Oprah Winfrey, or Kamala Harris. In fact, Kamala Harris is the first female African-American Vice President of the United States in history, which makes it clear that the norms and rules settled in the past can't be broken. She personally believes that, and she's also hopeful that her legacy will create an easy pathway for the generation of women behind her.
Point of information.
Yes, please.
Kamala Harris is still surrounded by a Congress full of men, and she still isn't even though she has power, she's still surrounded by men who also have lots of power.
Yeah, but she is the first step of the change. We believe that in the future, more and more women will be able to follow her steps and create an equal world. We believe that progress will make a unified world. We believe that in the future, women will not be treated as inferior, but as equals. This is why this House believes that the world will not always be a patriarchy. Thank you.
23 seconds. May I please introduce the second position?
Ladies and gentlemen, members of the proposition, judges and chair, This House believes that the patriarchy will always exist in society. Now, I'd like to start off by rebutting some of the points made by Kichin. First of all, the development made by feminists is pretty much superficial, and not much has really changed in terms of the developments they've made in order to get women's rights. Also, we aren't really talking about rights in the first place. We're simply saying that men are the more dominant species, which has led to the patriarchy existing in the first place. Now, I believe it goes without saying there are some obvious differences between men and women, the most obvious being the physical differences between the two of us. But I'd like to talk about the psychological differences, which I believe also play a major role in what keeps men on top of society. Now, this can be observed in pretty much all aspects of society, and as a result, all societies, without exception, exhibit patriarchy, male status attainment, and male dominance. In other words, whatever the variation is, all these societies in the history of the world always follow the same direction and fall within the same limits. Even if there was no biological evidence or psychological differences between men and women, the opposition would then have to posit an explanation explaining how the patriarchy could even exist in the first place. The fact of the matter is, there is an enormous amount of evidence that dominance behaviour is more easily released by men. Now, the patriarchy... Yes, please.
Do you not agree that the social system that allows men to dominate over women is also actually negatively affecting men as well?
Or maybe it is, but if it was negatively affecting men, then how come every society to have ever existed would adopt it? If it was bad for everyone, then we wouldn't have even, it wouldn't have even been created. Especially not in every society ever.
Now,
yes, please.
are you saying that women profit from the patriarchy?
No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying that if they really didn't profit from the patriarchy, or that it wasn't inevitable or wasn't useful to us, then it probably would have never been created. But it has, and it is prominent in every society today and every society which has ever existed. Now, you could also easily define a patriarchy as the upper positions of the hierarchies of every society ever which we have evidence for are overwhelmingly filled by men. Now, the patriarchy itself isn't just a form of a hierarchy. No, thank you. It's not just a form of a hierarchy, but rather a hierarchy formed by many other hierarchies which make the society we live in today, or in other words, the patriarchy. Now, the patriarchy is not just, hierarchies themselves are pretty evolutionary based structures. The most dominant and powerful people rise to the top of these hierarchies. The idea that this idea has been going on for so long that our nervous systems has adapted to patriarchy or hierarchies as a permanent element of being. Hierarchies are not just inevitable in human nature, but also 100% necessary. So why do men rise to the top of these hierarchies? When it comes to excelling at the very pinnacle of hierarchies, men tend to sacrifice more to get there. This does not imply that women can't get there. As Daniela has already mentioned, people like Margaret Thatcher have risen to the top. We could also argue that in order to get to the top, they had to act more like a man to get there. No, thank you. Now, this does not... some of the reasons for this may be because men are more willing to get there. This might be because men value status more than women. Yes, please.
Do you think women also want to be there at the top?
Well, like I'm about to say, there are many reasons. Some women do. There are exceptions. Just on average, it's the most dominant people who try and the hardest to get to the top, and those people just happen to be men. Now, men do value status more than women. They also value dominance over people more than women do. On the other hand, women place more of their values on connecting with other people. It's these traits of men which is what has led to them being at the top of all the hierarchies. So, how is it that the patriarchy is this universal phenomena? Can the opposition really tell us that the patriarchy is not the default? It's not the way humans operate? It's the way we have always operated, and it's the way we will always operate. Thank you for listening.
I would like to now introduce the second speaker of the opposition.
Ladies and gentlemen, honourable members of the proposition, judges and chair, this House strongly opposes the motion that the world will always be a patriarchy. First, I'd like to rebut some of the poorly constructed arguments made by the proposition. I think Daniela was being frankly sexist when she stated that women have some sort of desire to men to hold the door open for them. Because they were suggesting that we have some sort of biological instinct to be subservient, whereas stuff like asking men to hold the door open for them is social standards and social expectation. It isn't a biological instinct, it is socialised, the same way gender is socialised. To quote Simone de Beauvoir, one is not born but rather becomes a woman. Brynley is deluded in saying that the feminist movement hasn't achieved anything in the past 100 years, because 100 years ago I wouldn't be standing here today, arguing the way I am. The same way this room would be dominated by women debaters. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to begin by putting this argument in a more optimistic perspective. The suffragette movement, i.e. the campaign by liberal feminists to secure women the right to vote, only began in the mid-19th century. Although this may sound like a long time ago for us here in 2021, compared this to the wider history of civilization and humankind, this was fairly recently. The word patriarchy itself only became more widely known during the 1950s, after women had secured the vote and a new strand of feminism broke out called radical feminism. Given the fact that patriarchy has only recently been delved into by feminist academics, of course it hasn't been dismantled yet. We need patience, perseverance, and widespread education on the patriarchy. This House believes that the given motion is too narrow, as how do we know what the future of feminism has in store for us? Given the huge amount of progress we've made in the past 100 years alone, the future is bright for feminism. Yes,
do you not think the progress that's made is superficial, as there's so many sexual violence cases and there's still the wage gap? What do you think of this?
Well, I'd like to say the wage gap is significantly less than it was before, because women weren't working as much as they are now. Women are politicians, women are doctors, women are teachers, which is something we would never have seen 200 years ago. With every wave of feminism, women's status in society becomes more increasingly equal to that of men's, in the public and private sphere. Unless the proposition has somehow acquired a time machine, since we've been given the motion, how do we know what the future of feminism has in store for us and what it will bring? Yes, please.
Do you not think that we are being more realistic, whereas you are being idealistic?
I do not believe we are being idealistic, because the patriarchy isn't something that comes naturally to us, but the dominance of men is something that's socialised. So we believe that, given all the progress women have made, that the future is bright for women, considering their recent dominance in society. We believe that future waves of feminism might be able to topple the patriarchy. Here in the proposition, we are not naive to think that this will happen soon, because as women, we know what it is like to be victims of the patriarchy. We hope that things will be better for future generations, and we will not stop fighting until that they are, like generations of feminists before us have done. And look what they've achieved today. As cheesy as it probably sounds, the future is female. This debate is a reflection of wider society. Women are dominating. And we assure you that when we get into places of power, we will not feed into the patriarchy, but do everything in our power to dismantle it. We often get so caught up in everything going on in the world that we need to take a step back and really appreciate how far we've come and the bright future ahead of us for women. Ladies and gentlemen, this House believes that the world will not always be a patriarchy. Thank you very much.
I would like now to introduce the third speaker of the proposition.
Ladies and gentlemen, members of the opposition, judges and chair. This House firmly believes that the world will always be a patriarchy. Firstly, I would like to rebut some of the arguments made by the opposition. You said that men are socialised in a certain way and can be unsocialised. However, the reasoning behind why men have more valued roles in society are due to the way that they are biologically programmed. Patriarchy is generally not an explicit ongoing effort by men to dominate women. It is a long-standing system that we are born into and participate in unconsciously. Ladies and gentlemen, this house is not trying to depict men as superior and women as inferior. We are simply highlighting that a patriarchy is a product of nature. The natural leanings of a man is to take control and assert their dominance, as they are biologically programmed to take on roles of leadership. Hence, male have primary power in the world as political leaders, business managers, property owners, right down to the head of the household. One of the main biological differences between men and women are the levels of testosterone they have. Men have high levels of testosterone, while women have low levels of the hormone, which explains why they have a variety of biological differences. According to Healthline.com, high levels of testosterone enhances verbal memory, spatial abilities, mathematical reasoning, strength, and aggression. On the whole, these traits make men more competitive for high-valued positions in society. This is why they are more likely to attain upper positions in the hierarchy. The patriarchy is inevitable, as civilization is destined... Yes?
Do you not agree that your team is being overtly pessimistic of your look on the future?
No, we're just being realistic in the sense. The patriarchy is inevitable, as civilization is destined to work at its full potential. For instance, a male army may perform at a better standard than women in combat due to biological strengths. On the other hand, a male caregiver may perform less well compared to a female caregiver, as women are biologically programmed to be more emotional and take on the role as a caregiver. This is not a form of discrimination or inequality, it is simply about efficiency. We play to our abilities and our natural advantages of people in general. Yes, there are always exceptions.
With information.
Yes?
Don't you think that women have been more widely educated in recent years to think about rights to education, that we've therefore been recently years have been educated to gain this sort of competitive spirit that men have had for the past few thousands of years?
Yes, that's true. As I've said, there's exceptions, women have made progress, but men are more biologically stronger and more competitive for these roles, these high-valued roles in society. But as I was saying, yes, there are always exceptions, as there are women who join the Marines, how they undergo different training compared to men. This is due to men's body being built completely differently to women. Men have the build to accomplish physical tasks. No, thank you. At a much stronger level compared to women. This is a mere example of the natural leanings that men have to take on more valued roles in society. No, thank you. However, when a woman wants to uplift herself in society and take on more valued roles, she wants to increase her control, meaning she wants to diverge from the norm, as in the norm being a patriarchy. Ladies and gentlemen, things are the way they are because they have to be, that they have always been that way, that there are no alternatives and that they will never change. Thank you.
Introducing the third speaker from the opposition.
3 minutes, 34 seconds.
Ladies and gentlemen, members of the proposition, judges and chair, this House believes that there will not always be a patriarchy. I'd like to begin with rebutting the first speaker's argument. Daniela suggested that women prefer to be undermined and prefer to not be treated equally by expecting things to be sugar-coated for them, to expect doors to be opened and to not expect to do things themselves. The second speaker of the proposition also stated that men try harder to assert their dominance in society. I believe this to be completely invalid due to just over 100 years ago, women in the suffragette movement fought and had their lives taken in attempts to get the vote for women. I believe this argument to be completely invalid due to the progression of radical feminism. Radical feminism is defined as a perspective of feminism in which they believe that they must take a radical approach when reorganising society to end the male dominance. Radical feminism also acknowledges the other aspects of misogyny, whether it be race, social class, or sexual orientation. Women are still oppressed by men, and our point is that there has been extreme... Yes.
Do you not think radical feminists has a pessimistic view of the world, as they would prefer a matriarchy where men no longer exist in society?
Well, further on, I am going to explain how we do not suggest taking the radical approach by creating misandry to end misogyny. Thank you. We are still oppressed by men, and we are not attempting to deny that. But our point is that there has been extreme progression, and we cannot deny that.
With information,
Yes, please.
do you not think that progress among women is limited by imposition of biology?
I do not believe that it is limited by imposition of biology, due to the fact that women are now able to spread their views and values and are now able to be in positions of power. Male supremacy is extremely present in society, meaning that there is indeed a patriarchy. But, no thank you. But we are attempting to be hopeful and trusting that progression in society will eventually bring equality to all genders. Germaine Greer is a famous radical feminist who is typically not exactly known for believing in male rights. She is what we'd describe as the stereotype of a raging feminist. She chooses to live a life without men, and she has accomplished many things as such, being a published author. Though we are not attempting to state that we should take a radical approach by creating misandry in an attempt to fight for female rights, we are saying that these women around the world are finding new ways to live without males, so why should men be the ones in charge? Why should they be taking dominance over our lives? No, thank you. In attempts to abolish the patriarchy, these feminists are challenging social norms and expectations. We as a society are breaking down the boundaries and defying gender norms and expectations. Transgender rights are being fought for, gender fluidity is gaining recognition, and women have a voice. If we compare today's society to society 100 years ago, we can acknowledge the accomplishments that we have achieved. Women have voting rights, we can divorce, we can wear trousers in public, we can have children as single parents, and we have the right to work. In comparison to what life used to be like, we have achieved so much. So if we keep fighting for what we deserve as women, we do believe that the patriarchy will be no more, and that there will not always be a patriarchy. Thank you.
4 minutes, 36 seconds.
I would like now to introduce the full speaker of the proposition.
Ladies and gentlemen, members of the opposition, judges and chair. This House firmly believes that the world will always be a patriarchy. I would like to start off by rebutting some of the fundamentally flawed arguments made by the opposition. The fourth speaker, Daria, said in a point of information to my first speaker that, do you not think the role of the nurturer is significant? Well, we're saying that men and women complement each other, but it is the roles that men play in society that they naturally lean towards, and will always do, that we value in hierarchies. This is simply a natural way, a natural progression that we've always gone through. This is a 4,000-year-old system. Kitching also dismissed the significance of the gender we are born with, as if men and women are biologically the same, but you're living in a different world, you're living in something that isn't a reality. We know, we have evidence that men and women are biologically different, and this comes out differently in the way that they act and in the way that they take on roles in society. The second speaker, Izzy, said that Daniela was being sexist when she said that women like men to open doors for them.
Well, this wasn't Daniela's point. Daniela was simply stating that this societal phenomenon is a reflection of the male dominance tendency, a reflection of the longevity and inevitability of the patriarchy. She was simply showing how this manifests in society, and it's something that we can all relate to and we see in everyday life. Then the second speaker talked about toppling the hierarchy. Well, this is a 4,000-year-old system. You can't believe that this is going to change in this way by individuals going up against it. It doesn't work like that. This is something that's deeply embedded into society, and it's human nature. And even if we make progress and men and women have the same positions, history has shown us that things always revert back to how they're naturally programmed to. Then the third speaker suggested that a patriarchy means that women have no independence. Well, we're simply stating that there are certain roles that are biologically destined for the genders. These set limits, there are always exceptions to everything, but this is something that isn't true. She then talked about how we need to be hopeful and trusting that this 4,000-year-old system will just one day disappear. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we can all see, if we put our realistic brains on, that just isn't going to work. Ladies and gentlemen, it's an undeniable fact that thousands of years ago, our societies were secular. This was before globalization, when things unfolded in an effort to survive and to thrive. The patriarchy formed in each and every one of those societies. That is not random, that is human nature. The physiological differences between sexes set limits, and you can have as wide of a range in systems as you'd like, numerous exceptions to these findings, but this is limited and always will be by imposition of biology. The patriarchy is not a social construct as the opposition would lead you to believe, but institutions simply reflect and incorporate a population's observation of the male dominance tendency. We develop expectations and socialization concordant with this, and it is those sociological outcomes and institutions like that of marriage that change and evolve. But the root cause of this, the patriarchy, it never has and it never will. We don't need to enforce a patriarchy. We don't need laws to oppress women. This is evidenced through the differentiation between countries like Saudi Arabia and the UK, where laws for women are so starkly different, yet a patriarchy exists in both to varying degrees. Nor should we have laws to enforce a matriarchy. When you keep talking about radical feminism, that's extremist, that's unnatural, and that would work against our natural capabilities and our natural tendencies. The opposition is ultimately living in a utopia, one that contradicts the thousands of years' worth of historical, biological and sociological evidence that we have accumulated throughout the ages. These factors the opposition cannot deny. The patriarchy is natural, it is undeniable, it is inevitable. Thank you.
4 minutes, 45 seconds.
I would now like to introduce the fourth speaker from the opposition. Ladies and gentlemen, friends on the proposition, judges and the chair. This House firmly believes that the world will not always be a patriarchy, and that we can fight against it to bring about change. It is important to look at the change that feminists managed to achieve considering their resources and support. 100 years ago, this level of equality between the genders wasn't even imaginable. So, think now. We're at a point in society where it's not just women fighting against the patriarchy, because we realise that it is not just women being oppressed by this reigning social system. With this growing support that feminists and women now have, it is an undeniable fact that change one day will occur. To quote the feminist Fran Anstey, women are the takers of... Women are being exploited as a part of the nuclear family and in turn are being oppressed. The way to achieve change and true equality is to demolish the patriarchy. It's about removing gender stereotypes and changing the perceptions that people have of them. The opposition argues that male supremacy is natural and that patriarchy is inevitable. Why is this the case? Because women have been oppressed for 4,000 years. Women didn't have rights and are finally breaking away from their biology and are finally gaining a voice in society. The second speaker pointed out that Kamala Harris is surrounded by a Congress of men. Yes, this is the point. She's surrounded by the patriarchy. But it's these small steps, getting women in office, small steps that will help us lead to change. The second speaker said that men sacrifice more to get to the top and may be more willing. And that women value connecting with other people more than rising to the top. Now, I can only use my personal experiences, but I don't exactly value connecting with my peers more than I do my future. I think I value my future and where I'll be in life as equally as I do with my male peers. I don't think that they try harder. I don't think that they're more determined than me simply because they're a man. He also said that women have to act more like a man to be able to rise to the top, and said that they have to act more like men to rise to the top. Now, this just highlights the problems within our society more than anything. It highlights the fact that people aren't acknowledging women, and this shows that change needs to take place, and we believe that one day it will. The third speaker said that we said men can be unsocialized. No, this isn't the case. But for future generations, we're not talking about within the next 20, 50 years, we're talking about within the entirety of our world's future. Who knows what's going to happen in all that time? And she said that there is always expectations. If there are always expectations, why is there not room for change? If one person can make a change, why can't everyone? Why can't society change the whole? She asked that, do you not think that radical feminists are pessimistic in the fact that they want a matriarchy? And the fourth speaker said that radical feminists are extremists, and the fact that they want a patriarchy. Why is the fact that women want a matriarchy extremist, but the fact that we have a patriarchy in our world natural, undeniable, and inevitable? What is the difference between men and women that a patriarchy is good and a matriarchy is extreme? And now we're not suggesting that a matriarchy is the way to go, but it's what some people want, and if this is what some people want, why not in the future will they make change, not to make a patriarchy, but to demolish, not to make a matriarchy, but demolish the patriarchy. Their whole idea was about biology and that women aren't biologically allowed or don't have the same roles in society as men. Women are not tied down to their biology like they used to be. Given the opportunity, birth rates are lowering, women are breaking away from these stereotypes that society has placed onto them. One of the last sentences the fourth speaker said was, we don't need a patriarchy, but we have one. It's their whole idea. We don't need a patriarchy, so why not in the future will there be change to dismantle it? The proposition here today is simply pessimistic about the future. They see the world just as it is in this moment and not for what it could be. We believe that with enough perseverance and time, change can occur. The motion today is not whether or not there will still be a patriarchy in 20 or 50 years. If so, this would be a very different debate. The motion is that there will always be a patriarchy, meaning that our world will forever be ruled by men. We cannot even begin to predict what the future will be like, so how can they have a definite argument against the demolishment of the patriarchy? Now, they view our argument as idealistic and they're simply realistic. This is not the case. In debates such as this, where we're debating about the future of our world, it's difficult to tell right from wrong. We, the opposition, hope for a better world, while the proposition cannot see past this oppression. We hope for a world where men and women alike are not oppressed by this corrupt social system that is the patriarchy. We hope for a world where women are not taken, are no longer the takers of the patriarchy. Thank you.
If you want to sign out early today, I don't see any issues in that.
The winner is Team COBiS.